Tatum the drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with a Sunday Mailbag episode of You Got Boston. And this is the second to last Sunday before the Celtics season starts, or at least it starts in my eyes, because we'll see Celtics Media Day is the 24th, which is just over a week from tomorrow. And yeah, really excited to be able to jump back into things and to be able to jump back into the Celtics season. It feels like this slow period has been going on for months. But really, it's just been like 2 months because we had so much going on after the conclusion of the NBA Finals, from the Celtics, going to the draft and Vegas Summer League, and then obviously to the Olympics. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Noa Dalzell, and I am the host of this show, You Got Boston. I also cover the WNBA for SB Nation, and cover the Celtics for Celtics Blog and for CLNS Media. And I'm officially on my second year of covering the team. Last year was my first year on the beat, and it was a lot of fun to cover a team that I've followed my whole life, win the championship my first year doing this work. So this is an opportunity to answer questions, so feel free to throw in any questions you might have in the chat, and I have a couple things that I'll share off the top in the meantime. The first thing I wanted to mention was the fact that you probably all have seen there's been a big media tour that Jason Tatum has been on. And Tatum is a new author of a children's book. It's called Baby Dunks a Lot. I have a copy right here that I was lucky to get in the mail. Cute story. It's about a kid who knows how to dunk a baby, and basically it's inspired by Tatum and Deuce, and this idea that Deuce was always around the team, and so this baby is also always around the team, but he's actually on the team. So basically, if you've been online or you've been watching TV or whatever, Tatum has been everywhere. He was on Late Night. He was on Good Morning America, I believe. He's been making the rounds. He did book signings in New York and in Boston. And it's been fun to watch because it's just kind of a cool thing. But I also spoke to his co-author, Sam Apple, and I'm going to have a story on that coming out soon. But for those of you who are curious, the way this came to be is this guy, an author, basically approached Tatum, letting him know that he had this idea for writing a book. He wanted to do a book about basketball, and he figured like maybe a baby could be worked into it. And so Tatum and Tatum's team was all excited about it. They met, and they kind of got this idea together. But the thing that he told me that was kind of funny was that Deuce was a big part of putting this book together and just kind of influencing pictures and all that, and making illustrations. So I'll have a story and kind of the behind the scenes of how that came to be. But in the meantime, yeah, we're a week away from everything kind of getting started. Another thing that happened this week that I just saw, and I obviously wasn't there, but Al Horford received a very high honor in the Dominican Republic, the country that he's from. He's the first ever NBA player to win a championship from the Dominican Republic. So he was awarded a high medal of honor from the president, and Joe Mazzulla was there. Assistant coach Tony Dobbins was also there. So that was pretty cool. And then other than that, I mean, we're just starting to see players re-entering the practice facility. Lonnie Walker has been posting every single day that he's there. Jaylen Brown is officially back in Boston and working out. And a lot of the young guys have been here for a couple of weeks. So it's just a matter of time before the full team is here next week. But yeah, in the meantime, you can kind of see everybody's finishing up their ventures. Sam Hauser had his kid. So those are just some of the updates that we're just seeing across the board. But for the most part, yeah, nothing substantially new, but we're still going to do these Sunday mailbags just for any questions that people might have. And I will start with a question about, do you think the Sixers/Knicks can actually pose a threat to the Celtics? This has been a common discussion point. I think it's just a natural part of the offseason, is wondering whether or not particular teams can overthrow the Celtics team and win the championship next year, or at least eliminate the Celtics. And I do think the Sixers and the Knicks are probably two of the teams that are most in the mix right now to be able to actually advance in the East. Outside of Boston, I would add Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee's being a little underrated just because everything kind of went wrong for them last year. I also do think the Pacers are being underrated. Like Mazzulla was on Locked On Celtics a couple weeks ago or a week ago, and he said the Pacers were the hardest team that they faced off against this past playoffs. So certainly we saw that as well. And I think that people are kind of forgetting about the Pacers, and they're only going to be better. I think it's a young team. So that's another one that's in the mix. But specifically to answer your question around the Sixers and Knicks, I think the thing that you have to wonder about is which teams defensively are going to match up with Boston, and specifically have guys that can guard 1 through 5 and guard, be able to switch. And I do think that New York is better suited for that than Philadelphia at this point. Obviously, we haven't seen this New York team come to fruition. And I do think Mikal Bridges, like his defense that he's really known for, like there was a little bit of a drop off last year. And really since he became a Brooklyn Net. But I think that you'll see him be a better defender now that he's not shouldering as much of the offensive load on a Knicks team surrounded by so many other options. So I think the Knicks are their biggest threat. I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks had like a top 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. The Sixers, it just really relies on health in a way that I think is pretty unique. Like you just have a bunch of guys that don't necessarily have the best track record of staying healthy. And Joel Embiid, I don't think he looked great in the Olympics, but I also just think in general, like he has just dealt with so many knee things and things that just kind of get worse and accumulate and kind of stack up on top of one another. And then you also have the fact that Paul George has had his fair share of things. So the Sixers, to me, it's like you have to rely on the health of those 2 players that have been historically somewhat inconsistent. And then you also have to, you're counting on Tyrese Maxey continuing kind of his prolific play from last season, if not taking another leap. And I really do believe in Tyrese Maxey, so that's why I think that they pose somewhat of a threat. But I guess all that to say is that I think that this team, the Celtics team, like though they're the favorite to repeat next year, like so many things could go wrong, so much could happen, and any one of these teams can also be a huge surprise. Like I don't think people expected the Thunder to go from a play-in team to the number 1 seed and be like a really good team and be, they had a chance, I think, against really anyone last year. But so there might be like a sleeper team too. There's nobody I'm looking at in the East that I'm like, I think they're going to come out of nowhere. But I just think at this point, like to say anything more confident than the Celtics are my pick out of the East would be somewhat misguided at least. So that is my first answer. Question here from Neil. Do you agree with Tatum saying that we will see the Mavericks in the finals next year? So that is a reference to the fact that when Tatum was on, was it Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel? I always mix those 2 up. But I watched the show live, and he was asked a couple of questions, including one of the first question I think he was asked was whether the Knicks were going to be better than they were last year. He said yes. He was also asked who he thinks will win MVP next year. He said, "Can I say myself?" And so he said himself. And then one of the other questions that he was asked was, who do you think will be in the finals next year? And this was just like a natural headline, but he was asked, he said the Celtics and the Mavericks. And I actually don't think he really believes that. I don't think he would have picked the Mavericks, but I think it's like kind of like the safe PR answer to have is to say the team that you literally played against last year, because you're not really hyping up any team. You're not really scoring any team. I don't think you want to pick like the Nuggets or the Thunder, or just like put that out there. So yeah, so I don't agree with him personally. I don't think that it'll be a rematch. I think it's really unusual for 2 teams to be in the finals and then to both be back in the finals the following year. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it's on the table. But I think it'll be more likely for the Nuggets or the Thunder to make it out of the West next year. Those are probably my top 2 teams. Timberwolves would be probably my third, which is weird to say because the Timberwolves obviously lost to the Mavericks. I don't view the Mavericks as a team that's going to string together multiple finals appearances in a row. So yeah, that's my perspective on it. I'm not obviously sure, but I think that he didn't say that because I don't think he said that because he believed it. I think he said it because he recognized the fact that it's the right thing to say. You want to say the team that you just faced, and no, that can't be that controversial. If you just picked like a random team, it would have become like a big story. And Tatum's smart. With not putting his foot in his mouth and not saying things that could potentially be controversial or things that can end up being, I don't know, a big storyline or whatnot. There was a big story with him, at least a story with him this week, and he did an interview with Bobby Kravitsky at Sports Illustrated. And in that conversation, he said, Bobby asked him, do you think that you'll make do you think that will still go after MVP next season? And he basically said, like, why not both? Both winning a championship and winning MVP. And I don't think Tatum will win MVP next year. I don't think he's going to be one of like the contenders really, just because I think it's hard to come off of the season that they had where they won the championship. They clearly have so much talent. He wasn't like the finals MVP, so he would have to be playing at like a crazy level this year. So that's my take on the Tatum stuff. I'm really curious. I think I'm the most curious about, I think, for early in the year is just seeing how Tatum is going to fare with the shooting struggles, because I feel like that became such a big story during the postseason, shooting 20% from three, and then obviously not hitting a jump shot in the Olympics. Again, really small sample size, but that became a big thing as well. So I would love to see him come out of the gate and just be shooting well. I think that would be great for his confidence. I think that would be great for the media, for us not to have this as a storyline to talk about and not to build it up even more. And I just hate watching guys that are good shooters just go through prolonged stretches of not being able to shoot, because I think that it's kind of a tough watch. And then also you don't want to start wondering if defenses are going to play him worse or play him differently. Like, I would hate to see him be left open purposefully as a 3-point shooter, because he's been shooting 20% all season and last playoffs, and it's getting to the point where teams are trying to pick their poison. So yeah, that's my perspective on that. Got another question here. Not a Celtics question, but do you think that people are letting the Heat fly under the radar? Yeah, definitely. And I'm guilty of it as well, because I just went through a bunch of teams in the East and I didn't even mention them. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat are in the conference finals again next season, because history has shown that Jimmy Butler and the Heat, when he's available, which he obviously wasn't last year, like they're a conference finals team almost every year. And so I think the Heat didn't make a big splash at all, really, in free agency via trade. They're really just counting on their young core getting better. And they're counting on guys like Jaime Jaquez, who was a phenomenal rookie, taking kind of an additional leap in their second year. And I think they're mostly counting on health, honestly. Like if you watch Pat Riley's post-game presser or postseason presser last year, he talked about, Tyler Hero and guys just not being available and really needing health and availability to be the priority. And it's tough because those kinds of things, it's like, you don't have, you can say that, but if guys are injured or something freaky happens, like you can't control that. So I think the Heat's it's gonna rely on like a couple guys taking a leap. It's gonna rely on people staying healthy and like Jimmy Butler playing, 70 games and not, less than that, and Tyler Hero being available for much of the year. And, they're going to need to be operating like at their best. They don't have as much margin of error as some of the teams that I mentioned, or even the Celtics. Like, Celtics can afford, I think, Porzingis missing a big portion of next year. And even so, I think they're going to be fine. So yeah, I think with the Heat, like my guess, if I had to guess, I think I have them in the 5th or 6th seed next year. I do think they're going to surprise some people a little bit. Like I think people are just kind of forgotten about them because they were a first round exit. But again, they were first round exit against the team that beat everybody in 5 games, right? So like one of the funny things from last year is we had like the Cavs coach, David Bickerstaff was fired after that series. And it wasn't just for that series, but like ultimately that team, if they had the same outcome as any other team that played the Celtics. So it didn't reflect that poorly on you last year to lose to the Celtics in 4 or 5 games, because literally everybody did it. But yeah, I think the Heat, if Jimmy Butler was available, maybe it would have been a longer series. Probably if they had full health, they wouldn't have been the 8th seed and they would have not had to face the Celtics in the first round. So a lot could have gone differently. Mazzulla likes to talk about how all it takes is a couple plays and the outcome can be completely different of a series. Like he said on Locked On Celtics that he thought the Pacers series should have been a 7-game series. And obviously it was a 4-game sweep, right? So those kinds of things can make a big difference as well. Not a question, but I think this is a good comment from Neil. I feel like the addition of Thompson will spread the floor more. I can see the Mavs running it back, but maybe Klay is still rusty. So I do think Klay Thompson is a huge factor, whether the Mavericks are going to be a finals or a championship contending team again. It was so obvious in the finals that they were lacking a couple of like real scoring threats, and a couple of guys that have been there before, that the moment wasn't too big for. And the Celtics game plan was they figured out, we're gonna let the role players shoot. Like we like our chances with some of these other guys, and they didn't capitalize, right? And I think that could have backfired if one of those guys had gone on a hot shooting stretch. Like I remember when the Celtics played the Thunder during the regular season, like Josh Giddey all of a sudden was just like hitting his threes and they lost that game. But I think that the Celtics went back to the drawing board and would have run it back and done the same thing if given the opportunity, because ultimately, like Josh Giddey's not a great shooter. And so you got to go with the math. And I think Thompson would have changed the game plan and maybe would have opened things up for other people, because now you have to respect his jump shot, especially as a catch and shoot player. Like I think with the Warriors at points last year, he was doing a little bit too much. He was kind of looking to be the secondary scoring option. There weren't the threats the Kyrie Irving and Luka are on the floor alongside him. And so, yeah, I think Thompson's going to have a good year next year. I think people are going to be a little bit surprised. But I don't know that he defensively, like I worry about a team that has Kyrie Irving, Luka, and Klay Thompson all on the floor at once. So what he adds on offense, like just at this point in his career with the injuries that he suffered and everything like that, like I do see a world where Klay Thompson is not necessarily going to be enough to get this team over the hump. But that being said, like certainly he has the ability to do so if he's at kind of at the highest capacity that we've seen him be in recent years post injuries. And I'm a big Klay Thompson fan. I know that's kind of an unpopular Boston opinion. I just like his game, and I especially liked his game when he was at his prime, when he was able to score 37 points in a quarter, but also guard the opposing team's best player. So we're not going to see that, but I think even a reduced version of that is going to be quite impactful for this team. Question here on the midseason trade deadline. Do you think Brad makes any moves before the trade deadline just as a way to potentially ensure the front court and backup guard spot? Shore up the front court and backup guard spot. So I think the whole idea with the midseason trade deadline is that it's an opportunity for the Celtics front office to say, like, where are we at through the first few months of the season? Kind of a midpoint mark. I mean, it's obviously a little bit past the midpoint mark, but thinking about the year as a whole, it's an opportunity to say, this is what we've lacked. This is what we need. Are there guys like flyers that we signed or players that really haven't panned out that maybe would be better off to send to a lottery team to give them additional minutes, like what we saw with Delano Banton and Lamar Stevens last season? And I honestly didn't think they were going to make a move last season because I felt like the team had, kind of all the pieces together and they had a really special group together, and you never want to bring in somebody that's going to hurt the locker room in any sense. And that's something that we heard quite a bit about last year was they were really worried about bringing in somebody that was going to take away. And so that was a huge priority. And when they traded for Jaden Springer and Xavier Tillman, like part of the fit was the locker room fit and the culture. And I'm sure they talked to lots of people that knew those two guys really well to make sure that they wouldn't be bringing anybody in that was harmful, that could kind of disrupt what they were doing. I think it's going to be a similar situation this year. If Porzingis is back by then, which he should be, and everybody's playing well, and maybe some of the post players off the bench reach kind of their ceiling, and everybody's playing their part, that maybe you just keep the group together. I mean, this is not a group of a bunch of guys like last year they signed some players that were completely new to the organization. Between the two that they had traded away, there was also Shea Brissett, Vima Heilig. So there was candidates for guys that were really with just the organization for a few months. And now you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, maybe this experiment didn't really work, or maybe what we thought we could get out of Delano Banton, like, didn't really pan out. Let's send him off somewhere else. There's not going to be those kinds of players on this year's team because it's literally all returners, except for maybe Lonnie Walker or another Exhibit 10 guy signing for the 15th spot. So yeah, I would say like it's less likely that they make a trade this season because of the fact that they were really intentional in like bringing these guys together. But also, I think the whole plan and the whole idea that Brad Stevens has had is like every single one of these players this team has earned the right to run it back. Like you just won the championship and you did so like in a historic fashion. So everybody has had the chance to do this. But if they start the year off and they're struggling and all of a sudden like there's a huge issue in the front court, like say Tillman's not playing well and Kate is not playing well and Porzingis needs more time, and like suddenly you're looking at this team and you're thinking to yourself like, okay, we need to get like a more proven front court guy, like a veteran player that's been here before, playoff production, all that. Then maybe you do ship out some of the other guys that you can afford to ship out. So I do think the first half of the season is going to be like a trial period. But if I had to guess at this point, I think maybe you're going to forego the trade deadline. Though we've seen Brad Stevens likes trades and he's made some big moves over the last few years. Okay, question here on Nimish Keita. Do you think that he can have a similar role to Robert Williams? That is a tough one. I don't think so. I think that Robert Williams had things about him and his instincts that were honestly very unparalleled. Like, we have not seen many post players with his just features and the things that he was able to do and his timing, his hands and explosiveness. There's obviously a parallel there, and there's a reason why this question was asked, and I've certainly brought this up before and thought about it before. But to say a similar role to Robert Williams, I think that if he can provide a little bit of what Robert Williams provided defensively, that would be a huge win, because Robert Williams was a help defender that Nimish Keita just isn't right now, because he's just, from a schematic standpoint, I think that he still lacks a little bit of understanding on that front. So I'm going to say no. I don't think that that's what we're going to see next year. I don't think we're going to really see it in his career. Again, Robert Williams didn't really pan out because he was never able to stay healthy and be able to do what he did at a broader level. But it's tough. I'll be curious to watch him for a few games and to see if he gets an extended role, and we can talk about that one further. I think that would be an interesting deep dive. We're going to hear from our friends over at Game Time real quick, and feel free to continue putting in questions in the chat. I love going to events right now. It's football season. I love going to football games, concerts, really any events. Living in Boston, you can just put in any event into the Game Time app, and you can get the best prices guaranteed. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So all you have to do is figure out what it is you want to attend. For example, I'm looking right now to get tickets for my family for opening night for the Celtics. So I can search that game in, browse through the seats on Game Time Picks. I can already see there's lots of great deals. There are super deals, different tiers of deals. And basically, as I'm looking, I'm able to actually see what the actual perspective of the court is from that particular seats. I have to make sure I don't want to get them seats that are in the balcony that are too far away. I can see what the court view is going to look like from those seats. So that way I'm able to choose without just looking at a seat number, which maybe doesn't mean anything to me. I'm able to see right away that this is a seat that I want to buy for my family members for opening night, so that they can see the ring ceremony and the banner raising and all that fun stuff. So Game Time Picks makes curation much easier. It makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. It's all in pricing, so you can use this feature to see the total upfront price. So there's no fees at the checkout. So the price that it says is the price that it is. You get the panoramic view. You get a lowest price guarantee for Game Time. So if you find a lower price elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And there's Game Time ticket coverage. So your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Okay, so going to continue going on these questions. I got a question here about Patriot Sunday. I don't watch football at all, but I did check what time this game was to make sure I didn't do this live stream at the same time, because I'm assuming there's a lot of people who are very excited to watch the Patriots play. And I'm keeping up just so I'm not like an idiot about it, so I know that they won their first game. I'll check the score for this one. But yeah, I don't really follow other Boston sports much besides for the Celtics. Okay, question. Do you think Jordan Walsh or Jaden Springer will play more? I would say almost for sure we will not see Jordan Walsh this season, just based off the fact, he's still really young, second year in the league. I think he's 19 now, or maybe he just turned 20. And I thought what we saw from him in Summer League was a guy that is still very raw, that still has a lot of room for improvement, and that still leaves a lot to be desired. He seemed like the game was still coming too fast for him. The shot wasn't quite there. And I think right now he's still more of a prospect than an NBA-ready player. So I do think we'll see him play a lot in Maine, and I'll be in Maine quite a bit this season, covering games. I'll be doing some live streams from Maine as well. So if you're interested in seeing some of the rookies, Baylor Shireman, Anton Watson, maybe some of the training camp deal, I think Jay Scrubb will be up there as well from last year's 2A, if you guys remember him before he went down. So I think Jordan Walsh will be in that mix, but I don't think we will see him really in Celtics green in Boston at all. Maybe a couple games here and there. He'll be sitting with them on the bench. I think we'll see a repeat of last season for the most part. I thought for a second there that maybe he could play like that O'Shea Brissett role. There's obviously some parallels in their game. But now, after having seen him in Summer League and just thinking about how this roster is shaping up to be so deep, I'm going to go with a no for Jordan Walsh. Jaden Springer is in a little bit of a different boat. He has a couple more years of experience under his belt. I think offensively he's more polished, and I also think defensively he's more polished right now. Saw him play a little bit for the Celtics last year, but also saw him play a singular G League game and a single Summer League game, and he looked really good in both of those. I've talked about this a little bit on here, so forgive me if you've already heard the spiel before, but I do think that Jaden Springer is an NBA-ready player right now. The question is if the Celtics are a team that has a spot for him and for what he's able to contribute. But I would love nothing more than to see Jaden Springer somehow enter this rotation. And I think it'll have to be as a result of Derek White / Drew Holiday getting like full nights off, unless someone suffers injuries, which I don't want to hope for. But I very well could see like some of those guys that played through the finals in June, through the Olympics, get some rest days, and then maybe Jaden Springer kind of becomes a bench backup point guard in those moments, or just a backup guard, and Peyton Pritchard's running the show. So it's going to take like someone to be out of the rotation for a given night for Jaden Springer to play. But I think just given the fact that he already wasn't in Maine last year, he's been in the league for I think this is his 4th year now. It's kind of like this is the year you want to see him play, right? Like you don't want to keep doing this main thing much longer, or this, riding the bench, getting DNPs much longer. And he showed through a limited sample before he was traded to Boston last year, like he was playing in Philadelphia and he was guarding opposing teams' best players, like Steph Curry and Luka, and he did a really good job on those. So I do think that he's proven that he can handle things at the NBA level. It's just a matter of whether he'll be able to get an opportunity in Boston, and I hope that he does. But I predict that he will at some point. I don't think it'll be a consistent 10 minutes a night, but I think there'll be stretches of time where he's able to contribute. On that note, do you think Peyton Pritchard will have the chance to assert himself more as he matures into the NBA? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Peyton Pritchard is somebody that they've, Mazzulla and the Celtics coaching staff and front office have already shown that they believe in him. They think that he can really help this team, and they think that he can really be a starting guard in the NBA. And I don't think that it's going to be on this Celtics team, because they just have the depth, and they have two, fringe all-star players and two of the best defenders in the league. And that's always going to be a place where he has a disadvantage just defensively given his size. But there's going to be more and more of those games where he is playing 30 minutes or he's playing 25 minutes and he's scoring 15 points. We saw a little bit of that in the second half of the season once the Celtics had locked up the first seed in the East and they were starting to give guys rest days. And I think Peyton Pritchard was actually a finalist for Eastern Conference Player of the Week one week. And I remember we were in Atlanta and we asked Derek White about that. Derek White was awarded Eastern Conference Player of the Week, and he said, I thought Peyton Pritchard should have gotten it. So, we know that when he's given the opportunity to run the show, he excels, and he's going to have a big opportunity. I mean, last year he made a big leap. I expect that we'll see a similar leap this season. It would really help if his shot is consistent from the jump. He struggled early on last year, but a lot of things that were uncertain about him, whether he could run the show, whether he could kind of manage the game, that second unit, he showed that he could do that. And I also think that he showed defensively he's not as much of a liability as maybe people had thought, or maybe he was earlier in his career. So we'll see. Another question here is on Kata. Could Kata be the lob player the Time Lord was? I think he can, actually. That's the one area where, Rob had really good chemistry with some of the Celtics guards, and I think that his timing was really, really good. And timing is really everything when it comes to those kinds of things. So I'm gonna say that's an area where I think Kata could catch up and be a more Robert Williams lookalike in that sense, more so than the defense, where I think there's a bigger gap at this moment. Okay, question here on the Week Irv beef. I don't know if people saw this, but there was a report from the New York Post over the weekend that what happened between Wick GR Back and his father, who is 90 years old and has a 20% ownership stake in the team, is that Wick was paying everybody the max and kind of blowing through the Celtics cash, which everybody knows the Celtics have a very expensive payroll and really expensive payroll taxes as well. And the idea is that this report, what it claims, and again, I take it with a grain of salt because it's the New York Post and I haven't seen anybody in Boston media or the Celtics media cover this, and so it's hard to tell. But the idea was that it wasn't that Wick wanted to sell the team, is that his father kind of is forcing the issue, and that there was like a kind of conflict between them. If that's the case, that would actually make more sense, because nothing about like Wick's behavior, the way he talks, the way he carries himself, like anything that I've heard from anybody made any of us think that Wick was going to sell this team. So learning that perhaps he wasn't going to sell this team on his own accord, and it was actually his father that made the call, and that it's been a point of friction, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's why the rumor took off, because it fits people's ideals a little bit more than what we had anticipated, what we had kind of initially thought, which was that Wick was just selling the team on his own accord, which didn't really make any sense. It also makes you wonder, like, I wonder if there's a chance that the Celtics will not be sold, but I don't know. I don't think that's really on the cards right now. But my take is that Wick can go down as a Boston hero, honestly, because he's already one of the most beloved owners in sports. Obviously, everybody's super grateful by the fact that he paid everybody, that he extended everybody, that he gave everybody the contracts that they deserved, that they needed to stay in Boston, and that there was maybe going to be a little bit of a stain on his legacy of like, but then he sold the team, and then who knows what's going to happen after he sells the team. If the new owner does anything differently, then you can attribute that back to Wick, and like maybe had he stayed in ownership, he wouldn't have traded this player or didn't sign somebody or whatnot. Now this kind of clears his name a little bit, just because of the fact that it doesn't sound like he's the one that wanted to sell the team. So we'll see. I don't know for sure that this is true. I'm sure there'll be more reports that come out in the coming weeks on this topic. This is going to be a big storyline moving forward until the team is sold, and until we figure out who the new ownership group is. I also saw there was a WEEI report a couple weeks back naming the 3 finalists, and Steve Pagliuca was not on that list, and Jeff Bezos was. So again, a lot of swirling stuff out there, but there's a couple of sources that I really rely on. Like I think Adam Himmelsbach of the Globe is usually somebody that is like the first to know really these kinds of news. Obviously, like Walsh and Shams, if they have this intel, that would be a big thing as well. But I'm not going to necessarily run with the New York Post thing just yet, because at the end of the day, it is a tabloid, and I don't necessarily know what the sources are. But it's a story that makes sense, and I get why it caught on. Yeah, question here. This is a fun one. Did you have any fun summer league interactions with people in the NBA who aren't players? Quite a few, actually. One of the cool things was I talked to a lot of the Celtics assistant coaches that I just haven't had like the chance to form a relationship with during the season, just because everybody's busy and you're on the road, and also the kind of access that I had, it was like behind the court, so I wasn't like on the court for pregame stuff, and so yeah, that was cool to just be able to establish some more rapport with them. And the thing with Summer League, and I explained this a little bit when I was at Summer League, but the general idea is that it's an opportunity for people to like interface with players and coaches and GMs and scouts and agents, like in a way that's really unique to the NBA landscape. And like, obviously I had a media pass, so I had like different access than maybe a fan would have, but even a fan, like I saw fans just going up to players and talking to them, and coaches, like something you would never see in an NBA arena. So I would say Celtics assistant coaches were like the most fun interactions that I had with non-players at the end, at Summer League. But also I just talked to a lot of scouts and agents and people in front offices of other organizations, and everybody's pretty candid. Like I heard a lot of rumors about things and a lot of stuff that's off the record. But to be honest with you, like the last year when I first started doing this, and I was always like, how do you build sources? Like I feel like people are always like, league sources tell me or whatnot. And I thought to myself, like, I wonder if I'll ever be able to have sources. And I feel like now I have I'm not like going to be the most plugged in person, but I definitely have a better, network of people in different organizations and agents and scouts and people that I am in contact with now. So it was really productive in that sense as well. And it's just cool to hear like what people think about the Celtics. One thing that I can share is a lot of opposing teams, GMs, and front office people said like kind of like praise the Celtics culture, and they said like in the draft, everybody knows the Celtics are going to draft like good people who have good backgrounds and are known for being like good culture people and things like that. And so it was just cool to hear like candid perspectives on this organization from other viewpoints, because obviously I live in Boston and I mostly talk to people that cover Boston and are involved with this organization. So it was just good to hear kind of a neutral ground in that sense. We're going to hear from our friends over at Prize Picks, and then I'll go back to answering some more questions. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest, way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still alive. So right now, if you're watching games, if you're watching basketball, different sports, the injury insurance thing, that can be a lot of fun. That has already benefited me in the past as well. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, so I'm seeing some more comments, questions. I'm going to run through these because I know we've been going for a little bit here, but I have a hot take here from someone. This is that Pritchard might get traded this year. Brad talked about guys deserving a chance, but also that he wants to be sustainable. I think the second apron will be a factor with Lonnie Walker and Springer too. Pritchard might get traded, but I actually think that he's on a pretty affordable contract. So I think he is actually one of the few Celtics players that maybe you do have to keep around actually because of the fact that he's not getting paid $20 million a year. So he wouldn't be my guess. I would think that it's more if like another team sees like a really high value for him beyond what he's contributing on the team. Like if there's a team out there that really believes in Pritchard as a starting point guard in the NBA and is willing to give up something substantive for it, that I think would be more likely. But I don't think he'll get traded this year. But it's a hot take, so it's a fair one for you to have. Comment here from Tommy B. I hope Baylor has a role with his team. Bench shooting, playmaking, and underrated rebounder. I think Baylor will have a role with this team, but I don't think it'll be this season. Would love to be proven wrong. Would love to see like a rookie in the mix. Would be a fun little storyline, especially since we have like literally all the same players as last year. But Baylor at Summer League looked like he was not necessarily completely ready, but that he obviously had flashes of being an NBA ready player and a real contributor for the Celtics team. So I think Baylor will get to the point where he is in the rotation of the Celtics or another team. I think he'll spend most of this year in Maine alongside Anton Watson, alongside Jordan Walsh, alongside, honestly, J.D. Davison. So there's a young core there of guys that have been drafted over the last few years that are a little bit stuck. So I feel for those guys. I think Baylor, even though he's a little bit older, I would be surprised. But again, you never know what's going to happen. Like maybe Sam Hauser gets hurt, knock on wood. Like stuff like that can go, and all of a sudden you have a guy that can maybe be a Sam Hauser light on the bench. So another question about Peyton Pritchard. Can you see Peyton ultimately being the starting guard in the near future? The problem is that I think if Pritchard is a starting guard, like there are things about his game that would put him at a disadvantage against bigger guard. Like he has to make like a Jalen Brunson type leap, honestly, like offensively, like which is obviously a high bar. Yeah, I could see him being the starting guard on the Celtics. Like I'm thinking like if Drew Holiday retires or leaves, or if they have to offload his contract at some point because that's a really expensive contract. I'm trying to think like a Peyton Pritchard, Derek White backcourt. You lose them, you obviously lose something defensively, but I think it could happen. And I think especially because I don't think he's at his peak yet and at his prime. And some of you who follow me might know I'm a big proponent of Peyton Pritchard being an NBA All-Star ceiling player. I don't think that he's going to be an all-star necessarily, but I think that's his ceiling. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm a little stumped with this one, actually. I'm going to think about that one further. Comment here, PP would become the next Aaron Nesmith, Max Strus on a worse team. Oh, like Celtics killer? Yeah, I think absolutely. If you traded him away, he's going for like 25 every time he faces Boston moving forward. Question here is Porzingis going to be traveling to Dubai, or is he separated from the team during his recovery? Right now he's in Latvia. I would imagine he'll be back in Boston soon just to be around the team from the jump. I think he probably will travel to Dubai. I know in the playoffs he was like adamant about wanting to travel with the team, but I don't know for sure. So when I learn, I'll share that out. Question about Tatum's aura during the rap battle with Jimmy Fallon. I thought that was funny. I just like that Tatum doesn't take himself too seriously, honestly. Like he could be taking in all the aura stuff and thinking to himself, okay, I'm gonna be extra like I'm going to be extra uptight now and not joke around or not ever put myself in any positions that I could be made fun of. And instead he just doesn't care. So I think he just leans deeper in the direction of like doing the stuff that he wants to do. So I thought that was a funny moment. This is a good question. Do you think the starting five dynamic shifts at all this year? Do roles shift at all? Joe talked about innovating, not necessarily doing everything the same way. Yeah, it definitely will. And again, because you kind of answered your question, like I think that we're expecting, at least I'm expecting, like in my head subconsciously, that everything will be the same as last year, and then they'll just kind of run it back. But that's not what's going to happen because this is a different team, this is a different year, it's a different league, and you have to reinvent the wheel. You have to start from scratch and relearn the habits and everything in a sense, right? Like you still obviously signed everybody because you believe that this team could work. One thing I would like to see is a little bit more diversity in crunch time. Like I think during the regular season, you saw all those shots going to Tatum, and then in the playoffs, I think they became more unpredictable. So like that's a dynamic that maybe you see more. Maybe you see Jaylen Brown taking the final shot a little bit sometimes, or Derek White or whatnot. Like that's a dynamic where it becomes a little bit more egalitarian in that sense. I think Al Horford's minutes and miles are going to be even more limited in during the regular season next year, just because every year he gets a little bit older and every year he has more miles under him. And so he might be a guy that like you see has a smaller role in the rotation and that they just kind of like limit what they need from him during the regular season. And so wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing the starting five playing with like a different bench big a lot, like with whether that's Tillman or Keita or Luke. I think all guys that have their own unique advantages for whatever reasons. Trying to think what else. I mean, I think I've been thinking about is like, is everybody going to be able to keep this up? Like, I think Derek White had a great shooting season. Drew Holiday, Al Horford. Like, is everyone going to be able to keep that up? If anything, if anybody has a substantial drop off from a shooting standpoint, like that's obviously like something that might disrupt the dynamic as well. But I feel like I've been speculating about this stuff all summer. I'm so excited to actually just see it happen and to just see how things look and how different things look and who made a leap, who maybe is struggling a little bit, and how you can mix and match combinations. And again, like this team is unique that there's not going to be like a lot of new faces. You can't imagine how they're going to come work together. Like it's going to be the same guys, but I think we're going to still be surprised with some people making leaps and other people maybe struggling a bit. Another Baylor Shireman question. I think his role eventually will be that he's a good floor spacer. I think like a Sam Hauser style player, but he's a better passer and he's a less good shooter. And right now he's not as good of a defender, but the hope I think that is that he gets the Sam Hauser. But I think he plays that type of role where he's coming off the bench, giving you 15 minutes a night and just being a smart, like connective style player. Yeah, East does feel strong. I'm also super excited for Knicks, Bucks, Sixers. I'm excited for like all those top teams. And I've mentioned this, but I'm going to be on the road for a lot of these games. So I will be providing like on the ground coverage from, I think, hopefully all those big matchups too on the road as well. Porzingis' injury makes me think Celtics might finish third or fourth in the East. I don't think that the injury will be like, I don't think it'll be like a catastrophe without him, but actually like kind of like where you're at with the idea of the Celtics finishing third or fourth in the East. I wouldn't be surprised. I think everybody's expecting this team to be a top seed again because why not? And they were the top seed by just so much last year, but it's really hard to win a championship and come back and dominate from the jump. And there's a reason why we don't see it very often. So I have them like maybe coming in second or third. I wouldn't be surprised if they were in first. Like there's no reason to think that they wouldn't be, but I like where you're at thinking about this, and let's start to normalize it so people aren't panicking in a few months when they've lost 3 games in a row and it's November and they're in the 4th seed. So I get what you're saying. I will not be in Dubai, unfortunately. I've never been there. Maybe next year or another year. With the way the NBA is going with the Celtics and with the NBA in Dubai and all that, like there's going to be other opportunities. I'm assuming to go there. So hopefully another year. Do you think the Knicks will spoil the Celtics ring night? First of all, nothing should be able to spoil it. I'm a big proponent of like I get really worried about my friends and family spending money on Celtics tickets because ultimately like you could spend $1,000 on tickets, and then you watch the Celtics lose in the finals, and it sucks, and everybody's in a bad mood, and everybody wants their money back, and that's when I think the fans can start getting kind of nasty as well. But I think that the fact that the Knicks the fact that they already have ring night and the ceremony makes me feel safe enough to buy them tickets. I'm buying my dad and my brother tickets to opening night because even if they lose, I still think it's like going to be an awesome experience, and it won't take away from the fact that the banner was hung and all that jazz. But to actually answer your question about whether the Knicks will win, I can see it going 50-50. I mean, I think this Knicks team is going to be fired up, ready to go. But I also don't think the Celtics are going to roll into their own home and come out sleeping. Like, I think that they are going to want to win on ring night as well. So I can see going either way. It's a fun first round matchup, but honestly, I wished they had picked a team that there was a little bit more of a rivalry with. Like, I felt like the Knicks are, to me, like, they're a very likable team. I like watching them. I don't feel like they have like much friction with the Celtics at this point. They haven't played them in the playoffs in recent years. The star players over there, like, there hasn't been any individual storylines really. So it's more just like two big markets in the Northeast, and I get it. But I wish they had picked like Miami or a team that they just played in the playoffs. Like even the maybe the Pacers would have been a bad pick. I don't know. I think I just wish it was Miami, honestly. I felt like Miami so obviously the team they couldn't overcome throughout this playoff run, throughout these last few years, and obviously did it this year, won the championship. Like, give me Jimmy Butler and TD Garden. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would have been a better storyline. But yeah, I'm going to just go through a few more of these because I'm not really in a rush, honestly. Like, my timeline was I assumed everybody wants to watch the Patriots game at 1 o'clock, but I don't know. Leave a comment in the chat if you're a Patriots and a Celtics fan. I'm curious if that's like a complete overlap or if some people are like me and really just only follow basketball. I'm just curious. And I'll continue to answer these. Question here from Tom Coolidge. Crazy that the season is already so close. What do you think of the Sun beating the Mercury handily on Friday? Looks like they're prepped for a deep playoff run. And what Tom is referring to is the Connecticut Sun, which is New England's WNBA team, which hopefully if you weren't at all WNBA enthusiasts in previous years, maybe this year you're deciding to check them out, whether that's because of Caitlin Clark or somebody else. I think they've been a lot of fun. The league has been a lot of fun this year. So much talent across the board, so much history being made. And if you're a Boston Celtics fan, and you're a Celtics fan for regional reasons, if you're from around this area, the Connecticut Sun are currently the third best team in the WNBA. I also cover them. I'll be in Connecticut this week multiple times, and in the playoffs, they're actually going to most likely play the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark this weekend. This next week is going to be the first round of the playoffs, but I think the Sun have looked really, really good. They still have some outstanding issues. Like, they're a team, they kind of remind me a little bit of the Celtics of old, like where there was just down the stretch, you just worry a little bit about their offense, and then they traded for a high volume scorer in Marina Mabry, so she might be able to make a difference. So I would like to think the Sun have a chance. I don't feel as confident in them as I think for those of you that followed my coverage this past year, like I was very sure the Celtics were going to win the championship from the start. At least from like early on, I had a really good feeling about it, and I don't have that feeling about the Sun. I think that there's some outstanding issues that this team has that if you just look at like the New York Liberty, they just have a roster with less holes and they just have been more dominant this season. And I worry about the fact that the Sun have really struggled against the Aces and the Liberty in the last 2 years, but I do think that they're going to make it out of the first round with the Fever and maybe even the second round. So we'll see, but they're a fun team. Today, starting at 3 o'clock Eastern time, there's like 6 WNBA games today. So if you haven't been tuned in, this is kind of what I do with March Madness. I don't really follow a lot of college basketball, but I'll start paying attention to the regular season, like the last 2 weeks of the season, so that I can enjoy March Madness more. And so if you want to do that with the WNBA and you miss basketball, you can watch today and you can learn a little bit about the players, and then you can tune into the playoffs starting next week. And playoffs are just during the NBA preseason. By the time the regular season starts for the NBA, WNBA is completely over. So it's kind of a nice little way to cycle through one into the other. Question about Jaylen Brown's music video. I think it's funny, honestly. I'm not like a rap critic, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but I feel like he probably has room for improvement in just like his delivery. But I think that it's cool that he's doing the side quests. I think that it's cool that he's just trying out different things. And it's like, if I was a famous NBA player that made $300 million and I have a huge platform to do whatever I want, like I would try crazy fun stuff too. So he clearly had a message that he wanted to share. I think it's cool that he did it. I don't know that if I see a rap career for him, but maybe he'll drop a song here and there. Like, you really have nothing to lose. And I think that he's already shown he doesn't really care what people think. He doesn't really care if people want to laugh at him with the dunk contest, all that. Like, he's been the laughing stock so many times and he always comes out on top. So I think like this music video was just another example in my eyes of him not really caring what people think about him and just doing what he wants to do. And it was kind of entertaining, but I don't know that I'm like listening to the song in my free time much. Okay, I'm just going to run through these really quick. I'm going to take maybe 2 more questions. A lot of interesting comments here. Drew Peterson, a question about Drew Peterson as a dark horse rotation player. Drew Peterson was acquired midseason last year as a 2-way, and he again is re-signed as a 2-way this year. I don't even know if that spot is like guaranteed. Like I could see maybe him going elsewhere. He's another guy. I'm rooting for him. He's really nice. I've interviewed him a bunch of times, but I don't know that he showed at Summer League that he's NBA ready. And you don't want to read too much into Summer League because certainly Summer League has shown over time that you can have a player or 2 or 3 that struggle, and they struggle throughout the tournament, and then they eventually have a great NBA career. Like Sam Hauser didn't look great at Summer League, right? And so he's just the guy that I think his ball handling leaves a little to be desired. He's not like a knockdown shooter. So there's just like, there's nothing that he's like excellent at. And that's the problem. He told me when he first joined the team in Maine that he's looking to, Derek White is like his on-court inspiration, just being like kind of everything you can be kind of player. An all-around player. I don't know why I said everything you can be, an all-around player. And so I think that Sam Hauser is a comparison for him just because he's managed to be a connective piece. Obviously the shooting, but Drew to me is just like, he's not a good enough shooter to warrant some of his other weaknesses. So he's going to have to either make him a better shooter or work on those weaknesses. And I don't know that this year I see him entering the rotation of probably the most stacked team in the league. So probably not on Drew Peterson, but I'll keep covering him. I'll be up in Maine. He'll be one of the guys that I'm curious about. And I think it's super cool that the 2-ways from last year, JD Davison and Drew Peterson, are both coming back this season. And they're both staying with this organization. It just shows a level of continuity and buy-in for this squad, which is just a lot of fun. What do you think of the West for the upcoming season? I think the West is going to be loaded. If I had to pick like my top 3 seeds, I think it's going to be Thunder, Wolves, Nuggets. That was the 3 seeds. That was probably the top 3 seeds from last year, right? It's not a very bold prediction, but those are going to be my top picks. I think all 3 of those teams are going to take a jump, an improvement from last year. And I actually think that people are sleeping on the Nuggets, and the Nuggets are going to surprise some people because they're down some role players, but I think Jamal Murray is one of those guys that's getting really recency biased, where people are just thinking about his struggles with Team Canada and a little bit in the playoffs and some injury stuff. He just signed his Supermax extension. I think Jamal Murray is just, I mean, we all know he's a huge playoff riser, and I think that he's due for a good season, and I think he's going to surprise some people. So Nuggets, I think it's weird to say dark horse candidates, but because they just won the championship 2 years ago, but I almost feel like they're already falling out of public consciousness a little bit. But Thunder are going to be really good. Honestly, like a little scary good. Just the fact that they're like the only team that only for sure got better over the offseason to me, like of the contenders, because they lost Josh Giddey, who I think actually hurt them oftentimes. And I think he was just a guy that they couldn't really figure out how to use him. And then adding 2 great defenders in Alex Caruso and Lou Dort together, like that's just a nightmare. And then Isaiah Hardenstein, obviously, he is somebody that is one of the best offensive rebounders in the league, just a smart player. I think the Knicks are going to really miss him. And I've actually I keep forgetting when I talk about the Knicks that he's not going to be there anymore. I obviously know he's not going to be there, but he's an impact player. So Thunder, I think, are going to – I actually think they might come out of the West next year. So we'll see. But I'm very high on them. Yeah, maybe a trade for the Heat. Yeah, this is a funny comment. Joe will not allow for complacency opening night. I was just talking a few minutes ago about whether the Celtics will lose opening night to the Knicks. I think that there's going to be a very, very intentional, focused mindset heading into the season about Joe Mazzulla making sure everybody knows that we are not losing on ring night. Like, that is not going to happen. We're not going to be one of those championship teams that gets their ring night spoiled. Okay, this is a fun question. Who is the kindest Celtics player to fans behind the scenes? I'm going to start by saying I don't see all the fan interactions, obviously, but what a really good, capture of fan interactions is pregame when fans are lining up for autographs. The player that signs the most autographs is probably Jason Tatum. he doesn't do it like with a ton of warmth. Like he's not really chatting with the players. I think he's like very locked in, and but he does it. He really does it. He'll sign like he'll do it for like multiple minutes in a row. And it's unusual for star players. I've been at away arenas this year where like the security guards were like, "Oh my gosh, like he is signing so many autographs. Like this is crazy." I've never seen our star players do it like this, or like when other star players come in, they don't usually do that. So that's like one thing that stood out. As far as like fan interactions, it's probably Kristaps Porzingis. He's just like waving, smiling, very interactive, very charismatic, very comfortable with the fans, obviously. And then Derek White, I'd be remiss to not mention Derek White. He'll see like a random fan with like a Derek White sign in like the 5th row and like make sure to sign something. So sometimes I'll meet a fan pregame that has like a Derek White T-shirt or has like some Derek White memorabilia or something, and they'll be like, "What's the chances that we're gonna meet him?" And I'm like, "Actually, I think if he sees your stuff, he will for sure sign it." And there have been a number of times last year where I was right and I would then see Derek White signing the thing, and I'd already posted the initial fans, so it was kind of like a full story thing. So those 3 guys probably are at the top of the list. I think that Sam Hauser's a question here about whether he'll break the 3-point record this season. I was in DC for that game where he had, I forget how many threes he had, but he was well on his way to breaking the 3-point record for most threes in a single game in a season, and then he sprained his ankle. And it was so frustrating because it was such a useless game and it meant nothing, and there was like no interesting storylines that came out of it, except for the fact that obviously Sam Hauser was what was about to make history, and then he didn't. So he'll probably do it. I think he's the kind of shooter where he has the opportunity to. He has a good chance. But again, there's a lot of shooters that have tried to do it, that have come close, that haven't been able to. Pick to come out of the West, I think I mentioned, but I think it's going to be the Thunder. Second place would be the Nuggets. Better rapper, Tatum or Brown? Has Tatum rapped? Oh, he just rapped on the late night show. That was pretty bad. I think we have to go with Jaylen Brown there out of respect for the song. Okay, I'm going to answer this last question. I had to go through most of these, so I was only going to go for 30 minutes, but there were so many questions, so I just decided to do the hour. So I appreciate everybody for sticking with us here. Rookie of the Year prediction. I'm like honestly not the best person to go to for this because I don't follow the college players as much as I probably should, but so I defer to kind of my colleagues that are more draft experts on that. But maybe Zach Edey, just because he's so ready, I think, and like he looked really good at flashes for someone like when he was healthy. It's a question for him is like, can he stay healthy? Like he might be a little unlucky with just the transition, but maybe Zach Edey. I feel like those top guys, like maybe Reed Shepherd. I don't know. Don't fall. Definitely don't place any bets based off my perspective on Rookie of the Year. As far as MVP and Most Improved Player, this is fun. I'm actually doing all this stuff for the WNBA right now, so I've been thinking about to accidentally name a WNBA player. MVP, I think, will go to SGA. Yeah, I think I'll go to SGA because I think there's going to be some fatigue for Jokic, and especially because they had an earlier exit in the playoffs. Like that's how voters view this stuff and big picture. And I think that Jokic's early exit this past season is going to impact him next year in the standings, even if he has the same exact statistical season and the Nuggets have a good year. I don't think Jokic is going to get there. So just thinking about the other 2 guys, Luka and SGA, I just think the defensive stuff with Luka, he has to really make a giant leap there to overcome. Then if Thunder have the best record in the league, which I think very well might happen, and SGA has a similar year that he had last year, and he's a little bit older and he's a little more experienced, like I think he's going to have it. So that's my prediction for Most Improved, for MVP. For Most Improved, how do you pick Most Improved? It's like you got to see coming from a mile away. I'm going to get back on that. Feel free to ask me that next Sunday, and I'll have an answer. Or I'll just start next Sunday because I want to think about this one. It's a question. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here. I know it's tip off for those of you that watch football that want to watch the Patriots right now. But thank you all so much for joining in. I was like, doing these in September. I'm like, I don't know if anybody's going to join. I might just have to talk for an hour straight and come up with stuff. So I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate a lot of the names that I've started to recognize that have been regularly tuning into these. Hopefully have a fun interview this week with the former college coach of a certain player. And so I'll be there as well, and my dad should be on too. I think some of you might have seen I did an episode with my dad earlier this summer. Please do subscribe if you are able to. It's You Got Boston on YouTube, also on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Subscribe, like, comment, review, and again, always feel free to message me on Twitter with any questions, suggestions, comments. But enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll be back with another show later this week.